If you've experienced anxiety, well, first off, I'm going to take off my James Bond shades. I've been making too many videos with them. They're cool. My mom bought me them. But if you've been experiencing anxiety, this video is really going to help because you're going to understand the psychology behind what you're experiencing. And I'll tell you a bit about my story. For the longest time, and I'll be honest, sometimes I still experience this, I had deep social anxiety. And I never wanted to admit it to myself because I saw it as weakness, right? Which caused me to never be able to solve it, because if you don't diagnose a problem, quote unquote, I'm not one of those guys that'll be like, oh, you have diagnosed anxiety. I'm not talking about that. But if you can't understand the problem, then you can't look for a solution. So back to the story. I had just like sweaty pits every time I would go to school because I just was constantly thinking, what does he think of me? What does she think of me? Everybody's against me, this, that. When I would go up in class to actually read, and I've almost never told anybody this, when I would go up in class to read, I would get like this knot in my throat and I couldn't speak. And this happened ever since like the beginning of high school, or in the middle of class I almost broke down because they asked me to read something and I literally couldn't read it because it gave me anxiety. And I mean, to this day, it sometimes still gives me anxiety, but now I understand it. And I believe that it all went back to this one time when I was in church and somebody asked me to kind of read a passage and I messed up. Like, I messed up big time and people started laughing. And so I believe that got ingrained in me subconsciously to every time I would read, I would just feel like I was gonna die. Like sweaty pits, bro, you wouldn't imagine. And it extended to like when I would make public speeches in class, like when I had to present something. And all anxiety comes down to is trying to control the uncontrollable. So for example, if you have social anxiety, what you're really scared of is what other people think of you. So what you'll try to do is you'll try and almost shapeshift into this person who you believe people want you to be when you don't even know what they truly want. And that'll cause anxiety because you don't know what they want. So you're constantly trying to change for them. You're constantly trying to put on a persona and play an act that's not you. When in reality, you don't understand that you just can't control what they think of you. I like to always say this. The most perfect man in the world got crucified, Jesus Christ. So if he got crucified for being perfect, what makes you think that no matter how hard you try, some people just aren't going to accept you? And that's completely fine. Or for example, if you have anxiety with money, I know some people have anxiety with money. All you can control is how much money you make and how you spend it. You can't control the economy. You can't control next month's rent. You can't control if your dog gets sick. You can control how much money you make. So why don't you focus all your time and energy on that instead of worrying about some future that you can't control? Like my friend, for example, he gets anxiety when he goes up to try and talk with women, and I won't call names out here, but you know who you are. And I told him, okay, let's analyze this. Why do you feel anxiety? And he's like, well, because it's scary. And I'm like, yeah, no, it is scary. Why? And he's like, well, because maybe they'll think I'm weird. And you're like, I said, well, what if they think you're weird? They'll reject me. Oh, so you're scared of rejection. That causes anxiety. Why? Well, because if they reject me, then that automatically means that you're not good enough. So now you're placing your value in the opinion of somebody else. So your entire identity is in somebody else's hands, which means that it is uncontrollable. So you're constantly going to have anxiety about it. And now the way to solve this is to experience it. Experience the anxiety instead of just repressing it and pushing it down until it comes back up again. Like, let yourself be engulfed in anxiety and really understand where it's coming from. Almost treat it like a friend. And once you analyze this, as I always say, it's monsters under the bed. You'll realize it was never there to begin with because it's just your paradigms of what other people are going to think of you, of what things you think are going to happen. But when you focus on the present, on what truly is right now, you realize that number one, in your head, you play out everything to be so much worse than it actually is. Like, you think people are going to hate you for this or for how you dress or for how you speak. They don't give a fuck. You're not that important to them, for good or for bad. Number two, even if people did think that, it doesn't matter. because it matters what you think about yourself. And I'm not saying, I know you hear this all the time, and it takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of experimentation to truly like ingrain this in your beliefs of it does not matter what people think. So the way to actually combat this is to do the anxiety inducing tasks. So for example, with me, what I would try and do is I would try and raise my hand when the teacher asked for somebody to read. And holy fuck was I nervous. But you know what I realized? That when I would actually like make the choice of raising my hand, I would experience much less anxiety because I chose it. Nobody controlled me into doing it. It was a controllable, not an uncontrollable, okay? So for example, if you experience anxiety going up to a woman, go up and talk to a woman. And you don't have to start off like super like, hey, how are you doing? I thought you were beautiful. You start off by saying, hey, how are you? Cool shirt. And you leave. You don't have to ask for the number because there's no way if somebody says, if you say cool shirt to a girl, she's going to reject you because you didn't ask for anything. You just told her cool shirt. And then you'll experience the anxiety. And then when you leave, you'll realize, well, that wasn't so bad. And the next girl you go up to, you'll say, hey, cool shirt. Where'd you get that shirt from? And you start a conversation and you leave. You don't have to ask for her number. And you'll experience a bit less anxiety. Hey, women don't actually hate me when I don't hate myself. The next woman you go up to, hey, cool shirt, and you guys have a conversation, you kick it off. By the way, do you want to grab pizza? And she says yes. Oh my gosh, where'd all this anxiety go? And so by constantly pushing your limits, you become much less anxious because you realize that there was never any anxiety to begin with. It was just your projection of what other people thought and of uncontrollables that you were trying to control. So if you're experiencing anxiety, whether that be social, whether that be with money, whether that be with your future, which is one I experience a lot, understand that all you can do now is push the boundaries of your incommodities, of how uncomfortable you are, and grow. You can't focus on the future because you don't know what's going to happen. That'll produce more anxiety. You can't really focus on the past because it did happen. It's good proof, but it's not always a good metric to have. All you can focus is on what you're going to do now. Anxiety is a monster under the bed. And once you actually look under, you realize that it's not there. Turn on the lights.